Max Effort Monday. Yeah, whether you're in the car or at the office, it's time to give it your max effort, just like Bo and Blake.
So, hey, don't let your family down like a did on vacation, right?
Come on, get off your ass. And give it a max effort.
I'm ready to take this all the way.
SEC Insider Hit this morning, brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your car and home and save with your Farm Bureau Insurance agent, favorites.com, to get a quote. It's rivalry week, and we're live in the Bank Plus studio. Holy smokes, we're trying to get everything in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday before getting out of here for a couple of days. And who knows what will shake out on the coaching carousel over the weekend. Nobody loves a coaching carousel like SEC football fans. And nobody storms the field like Vanderbilt. So, I mean, what the hell? The Out of Bounds Show, our guests join us on the Yingling Lager guest line. This is ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Before we bring in our friend, national college football analyst with ESPN, Tom Luganbill, we want to drop some incredible audio from Sam Pittman.
I believe I'm going to have me old cold beer.
That's how he was going to celebrate. That's why the Hogs love him, that guy's beer and barbecue. Cold beer is one word in Mississippi, as you know, and we believe that it originated out of the Mississippi Delta. There will be a lot of cold beer, one word, said over the next 3 months at hunting camps, deer and duck. We welcome in Tom Luganbill. How about that drop right there, Tom Luganbill? Would you like to have a cold beer with Sam Pittman?
Oh, absolutely, man. I'll tell you what, when you do a coaches meeting with him, whether it's in person or it's on Zoom, that's exactly what you get all the time, every time. He's so authentic and genuine in the way he carries himself. I think it's one of the reasons why it resonates with the kids.
Look, he got bowl eligible. I don't think we were surprised that Arkansas won, Lugs, but to get up 42-6,
I know.
That shocked me.
I think it shocked everybody. Clearly Arkansas is playing with their back against the wall. Came out with more energy. There just seemed to be no air in the balloon for Ole Miss, right? Where was the motivation? I think which was a bit surprising, because that team, for the most part, week in and week out, has come prepared to play over the duration of the season. It just seemed for the first time that they weren't ready to play.
So, look, what happened last weekend really doesn't have an impact. You know, people reset, they get back together. 20-year-olds can flush this thing and so on. There's been a lot of rumors around Lane. So how do he and the assistants come off of that short week and get focused for the rivalry game in which Lane has dominated the last 2 years, Tom?
I mean, it's a really, really good question, because unfortunately, all of the rumors and all of the, as Nick Saban would call it, clutter that revolves around a potential coaching opening, all it is a distraction. There are no positives that can be gleaned from it, because no matter what Lane Kiffin says, you either are not going to believe him or you are going to believe him. But the only people that matter are the people that are in the building that are on that team. They have to trust what their coaching staff and what their head coach is telling them. I think it puts their football team, their psyche, their locker room in a really, really difficult spot, because these are things that the players have no control over, but seem to have a negative impact on the day-to-day when you're trying to prepare a game. And, to me, that's dangerous. It's just, and it's unfortunate, because you're dealing with young people. And as we all know, and as we saw this last week, if you don't respect your opponent or you're not prepared to play, whether you're North Carolina, whether you are Tennessee, whether you're Ole Miss last week, I mean, holy smokes. And so you got to come ready to play week in and week out. One thing we've seen this year, Bo, is we have seen teams that didn't show up, and it cost them.
Yeah.
And we've seen it each and every week.
Yeah. What's he supposed to say? I mean, other than I'm not going, which tells me, look, we've all entertained offers, except we don't have microphones in our face while we're doing it. And so, really, with where he is, Ole Miss has given him a nice, healthy option, raise, extension. And most people believe that he's the number one candidate for Auburn. But it's really, Luke's, the only thing he can, other than saying, I'm not going, there's nothing he can say.
Correct. I mean, that's all he can say. And he can't elaborate. And he can't elaborate for two reasons. Either one, he could potentially be taking the job and he can't discuss details. Or number two, he has nothing to do with the job opening. All right. And so what he's telling you is exactly what it is. I mean, that's if you can only tell you what he knows, right? But then on the other side of the coin, if there are details or there's any legitimacy to it, he can't give details on it. And again, it just, you put yourself in his shoes, put yourself in that coaching staff's shoes, put yourself in the shoes of the players on that roster. You've heard me say this in recruiting. Players don't like uncertainty and instability, right? And now, because of all of this stuff circulating around the program, that's what you've created, and it's tough to prepare beyond that.
Do you buy into any of the? All right, so Dabo's done an amazing job at Clemson building a program from somewhat nothing. He's been there since 2003, so he's going on 20 years. You would know better than I would, but I think all or almost all of his kids are out of high school. Sometimes a coach sits there and goes, it may be, even as much as he talks about Clemson and home, and I know he's the king there and all that. I know you've been close to a lot of the guys coming in and out of that program. Do you think that Dabo would even consider going somewhere else, Tom?
Potentially, yeah. I think that in the coaching profession, there's always another challenge. There's always something that might pique your interest. But I also think he's one of those guys that has a true appreciation for longevity and stability in the profession that is the most unstable profession on the planet. And there are very, very few opportunities where you have a chance to be a head coach at one spot, particularly in today's climate, and feel secure and stable and have the resources, have the people around you to get the job done. And I think he has a huge appreciation for that. It's not as if he has to go out and seek the bigger, better deal. I mean, he just got a huge bump, another pay raise. His record speaks for itself. I think the only thing that would get him to potentially look at something like that would just be a new challenge. But if where he's living, they're on a beautiful lake on Lake Kiowee there. You got a kind of a slow-paced lifestyle there in Clemson, South Carolina. I mean, a lot of people call it Auburn on a lake because they're sister schools, and they're very, very similar to one another. I just don't know if there's any. It's not like you're one of those guys that's gotten really, really good and you're making $4 million a year, and you're considered to be one of the best in the business, and a job that comes around for $9 million a year. That's not what we're talking about here with Dabo. So it wouldn't be a money shift. That wouldn't play a role in his decision.
Okay. Do you want to guess or who you think is going to be the next Auburn coach, or no?
I mean, I don't want to guess because I think all these people that are guessing don't really know. But I know that I really believe this. They're going to have to pony up financially to make up for some of their shortcomings in the area of meddling and getting in the way. And essentially what I mean is, okay, this isn't going to be an easy work environment. You're serving a lot of masters, all right? There are going to be people involved that don't need to be involved. We're going to have to compensate this guy to deal with that, whoever that person is, all right? Which means if you overpay a little bit, that's the reason you're overpaying. Because I think that's one of the things that the job's super attractive because they have resources, they have name, image, and likeness opportunities, got a great recruiting base. They just opened up a brand new football operations building that was about 25 years too late. So there's a lot of positives. But everybody knows the negatives too, Bo. And those negatives are pretty big. So to me, I think from a financial perspective, Is Lane Kiffin going to listen to them if there are overtures? Absolutely, he'll listen to them. He should listen to them. I don't think in any way, shape, or form Deion Sanders is involved in this at all. And I say that because I think Deion doesn't want anything to do with it. Maybe more so that than Auburn targeting him.
Okay. Well, we were debating earlier if Lane Kiffin were to go to Auburn, would Ole Miss strongly consider Coach Prime?
Potentially. And that might be a decent fit, a nice fit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I'm going to find very, very interesting, they just finished an 11-0 season. They've got a lot of Power 5 level players on that roster. They're not playing with your typical FCS level roster. But in that job, being who he is, he answers to nobody. So he's in control, right? He gets to operate the entire deal. He's not dealing with power brokers. He's not dealing with politics. He's not dealing with bureaucracies. He starts to make that jump, and he starts to move up in the ranks. And now all of a sudden it turns into a different environment, right? Mm-hmm. And he's his own man. He's smart. He's going to do what he wants to do, but that's a lot easier to do at a place where you're essentially the last word.
Right.
And that's not always going to be the case when you're moving up the ranks.
No, that's a good point. And can he staff at that level? We love his branding, marketing, recruiting prowess and all that. But can he staff at that level also will be the question. Pittman nailed it with Browse and Odom. And that has given him, some runway and another, the drill, Luke's. If you can get to your second contract, that's like a win for 90% of these guys because everybody's getting fired outside of, Saban, Smart, and, one or two others at some point.
Look at Coach O. We can fault Coach O all we want, but he did initially exactly what you just said. He got Dave Aranda, all right? Then he was able to get the offensive side done right, and he landed a quarterback. So he had the staff in place at that time, and the next thing you know, the staff changed and everything else changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the Golden Egg Thursday night. I'll ask you why Ole Miss, why Mississippi State. We'll start with Ole Miss. Walk us through how and why Ole Miss wins the game.
Oh, boy. If they're able to, I think, effectively run the football and limit Mississippi State's possessions on offense. I think that is going to be really, really important. And ultimately what we've seen from Ole Miss this year, when they've been at their best, it's when they've controlled the line of scrimmage and ran the football at will. I mean, at the end of the day, Jackson Dart's got a chance to be a really good player. I think his development has come a little bit slower than people anticipated. And so he's still prone to make that mistake. I don't think they want the bulk of the offense to be on his shoulders. That's critical in my opinion, and you got to limit the offensive possessions for Mississippi State.
All right. He is Tom Luganbill, national college football analyst with ESPN on the Out of Bounds show. What about Mississippi State? They're gonna sling it around, and Ole Miss just came off preparing for a team with KJ and Sanders and so on that ran it around and so on and imposed their will on the ground. How do you see that matchup, Tom?
For Mississippi State, I think that I know the opponent wasn't a challenge last week, but it's also one of those games where you're playing a lot of guys and you're getting a little bit more depth status. I know it's at the end of the year, but it's still important so that when you go into a rivalry game and you're starting to rotate some guys through, you just got a guy an extra 35, 40 reps last week. I think that's important. I'm still going to go back to what I've always said about this football team is if a defense gives them a 5-man box, are they going to take advantage of it? Bottom line. We have seen Mississippi State do that at times this year, and we don't generally see that, and they've been successful when they do. But this is one of those games where if Ole Miss can run it, Mississippi State's going to have to take advantage of every single possession.
Yeah.
That's the thing is if your possessions are limited, and I really believe this in this particular matchup, and that's where points are going to come at a premium for Mississippi State. They've got to score when they have the ball, and they can't score field goals.
And they couldn't score last year.
Nope.
And Ole Miss sleptwalked through the first half, and then the two best players on the field took over, Matt Corral and Sam Williams, and they pulled away. Okay. Zach Evans now being healthy, he went through this little
That's huge.
couple weeks, 3, whatever it was, where he was banged up, Lugs.
Yeah.
He is now, even though they got smoked Saturday, he ran the football and ran it well. I think adding him with Judkins and Dart, that's a big plus for them Thursday night, him healthy.
It's absolutely huge because he's the home run hitter. He is so talented. He's so fast. He's so elusive. And then you bring the hammer in with number 4, and it's a 1-2 punch. That's when, if you notice, the offense hasn't been as good when they haven't had the 2-back rotation, right? When they've had to just rely on the true freshman, and you're late in the season, and now you get Zach back. I think that's a big, big X factor in this game.
Ole Miss favored. Where are you this week?
I am at North Carolina and NC State, which a week and a half ago was looking really, really good. And North Carolina goes and does what they do against Georgia Tech. And NC State 2 weeks ago loses to Boston College, and this last week to Louisville. So it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out on Friday afternoon.
Oh, my goodness gracious. North Carolina lost to an interim coach.
Oh, that guy's done a heck of a job, man. I mean, if they hadn't have screwed up their game, Georgia Tech that is, screwed up the game against Virginia, which they should have won, he would have somehow had that team bowl eligible. And I had them twice in the first 5 weeks, and once was against Ole Miss.
Right.
And they were a disaster. So I don't know who's getting the job there. I know there are some challenges, but Brent Key is a Georgia Tech guy through and through. I hope they consider him, but I also hope if he doesn't get it, whoever does keeps his services in Atlanta.
Okay. That's a Friday game. NC State at North Carolina for you.
Yeah, 3:30 ABC.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. Tom Luganville, ESPN, ABC on the Out of Bounds show and the Yingling Lager guest line. LSU at A&M. If LSU goes goes over there and embarrasses A&M, what do you think could play out over the next 48 hours after that?
Nothing. And I know that sounds crazy, but we are talking about money here that is landscape changing, right? Because if there's this notion that they don't play well and they get beat, and now we're actually talking about relieving the head coach of his duties, you're not just talking about his contract. You're talking about multiple contracts, not including who it is that you'd go after on the next one. There is so much at stake here as it relates to that. What I think we would find is that either administratively or on his own, there would have to be a shift in leadership on offense that Jimbo Fisher would be all in on.
I don't think he'll do it.
Nothing about his history would tell you that he would. But I'm just laying out what may need to happen if he wants to lengthen his tenure in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. When you look at – but I wonder if 10, 15 donors look at it and go, what's the difference in this year and next year? It's a whopping $7 million less, which is I think 87 million is a rounding error at A&M with their wealth. Think about what the difference is between, hey, if we do it this weekend compared to next year, it's a whopping $7 million differential as far as payout. Your thoughts on that?
I'm with you. You're right. I mean, when you're talking about that amount of money and I understand you're talking about a university with a massive endowment, massive. So we think of $7 million as being a large number. At the end of the day, is it really? If you feel like you're that desperate and that you don't believe or foresee a dramatic shift in the win-loss column from this year to next, I mean, there's a lot to be considered there.
So, all right, I think that's one to keep an eye on. This impacts the SEC. Michigan at Ohio State. Do you give Ohio State's a 7.5-point favorite? Do you give Michigan a shot this weekend? Michigan, Ohio State at Ohio State.
Oh, absolutely, I do. Now, last year they won because they were the most physical football team, and they were able to disrupt Ohio State's passing game with a four-man rush, meaning they didn't have to put their defensive back end in jeopardy because they weren't having to add, 5, 6 guys to the pass rush. They were able to rush 4, drop 7, and affect the quarterback. They don't have a Jabo. They don't have Hutchinson. The question is, will they be able to do that again without having to add people to the equation? Because if they do, now you're going to have some one-on-one vulnerabilities, which is where Ohio State can really take advantage of you. So I think the inside game for Michigan on defense, Ohio State on offense, is going to be one to watch. Number 2, weather. C.J. Stroud has not played well in weather. If it's rainy, if it's windy, be interesting to keep track on how accurate he is. And then I think the other thing with Michigan is Ohio State has really improved defensively. They're still very, very young, but they've really improved. We know what Michigan's going to want to do. They want to run the football. They hope they have a healthy Blake Corum, all right? But at the end of the day, Michigan has really struggled to create explosive plays. They've really struggled to have consistent production in the red area on offense. 2 things that I think are very concerning against a team like Ohio State, because if Ohio State makes some plays on offense, gets some explosives, scores some touchdowns from distance, can Michigan reciprocate that? Because to this point during the season, they haven't shown they've been able to.
Yeah. Okay. Let's wrap it up with this. Tom Luganbill and the Out of Bounds Show. Who are your 4 playoff teams?
Right now, they would be some order of – I would have Georgia at number 1. I would have TCU at number 4, not because I think one of the top 4 best teams, but because I think they've earned it and they've deserved it. I do think Ohio State and Michigan, I don't care if one's 2, one's 3. I don't know if it really matters. But those teams that are in the top 4 right now deserve it because of not only winning with consistency, but winning in games that they had to have that weren't easy. Okay. You look at TCU last week. You look at Michigan last week. Even Ohio State last week on the road at Maryland. It wasn't easy, and they came up with ways to win. The question's going to be, what do you do with USC if they end up beating a ranked Notre Dame? They just beat a ranked UCLA, and what if they beat a ranked either Washington or Oregon in the Pac-12 title game? What do you do with them? That's going to be the team to watch.
They're 10-1 for our listeners. And if LSU beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, do they both get in along with the Ohio State-Michigan winner? And then who would be the 4th team is I think the big question.
Yes, that is the big question, and that's assuming we think TCU is going to go out unscathed, and they may not.
They may not. That's a good point. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, my man.
Same to you, buddy. Same to you. Have a great rest of your week.
All right, we'll talk next week. Tom Luganbill, that was awesome. And the Golden Egg breakdown, I thought he nailed it on Kiffin and Leach. Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Tom Luganbill joined us on the Yingling Lager guest line. And Ole Miss is a favorite. Involve him as they should be. Ole Miss is the favorite this week. It's really around a field goal if you go through about 6 books. So they're a field goal favorite in Vaught-Hemingway, 6 o'clock, ESPN in Oxford, Mississippi. Hour number 3 of the Out of Bounds Show, brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent.